I'm 83 years old, and yesterday I pulled another glossy brochure out of my mailbox. You know the exact kind I'm talking about. They always feature a picture of a silver haired couple laughing on a beautifully manicured lawn, perhaps holding golf clubs or sipping iced tea. The bold letters on the front call it an assisted living oasis or a premium retirement community. It is designed to look like a permanent vacation resort, a reward for a lifetime of hard work. But you and I both know what those places really are. We know what happens when the heavy front doors lock behind you and the reality of institutional living sets in. It is truly fascinating how completely we have been conditioned into accepting this as the normal, inevitable final chapter of our lives. If you look back at history, the modern nursing home industry, and make no mistake, it is a highly profitable industry, did not really exist in its current form until the 1960s. Before that era of mass institutionalization, isolating older, mostly healthy people away from the rest of society simply because they were slowing down physically was not the standard of human existence. Aging was treated as a natural, integrated part of the community fabric. But somewhere along the line, society shifted. Aging became viewed almost as a medical condition to be managed in a sterile environment, a problem to be warehoused out of sight, so the younger generations could continue their fast paced lives without interruption. And if you are currently at that stage where you are just starting to slow down physically, but your mind is still incredibly sharp and your spirit is still fiercely independent, surrendering to that modern system is one of the most fatal mistakes you can ever make. Now, I am not going to sit here and pretend that growing older is a walk in the park. It requires courage. I remember the exact season my own house started to feel entirely too big for me. It was not one sudden dramatic event that terrified me. It was a slow, quiet accumulation of small, unsettling moments. It was standing at the bottom of the basement stairs and realizing I was hesitating to walk down them because my knees felt just a little too unsteady. It was dropping a glass jar of pasta sauce in the kitchen and realizing I simply did not have the strength in my hands to easily sweep up the heavy, sticky pieces. It was waking up in the middle of the night to a strange noise, feeling a cold sweat prickle my skin, knowing that if I fell, or if I had an emergency, it might be days before anyone found me. That fear is not an illusion. It is incredibly real, and it sits heavy on your chest in the quiet hours of the morning. And right here, before we go any further, let me be absolutely crystal clear with you. I am an 83-year-old woman sitting in my living room, sharing my own life experience and the wisdom I have gathered along the way. I am not a doctor, I am not a nurse, and I do not know your specific health situation. If you have severe medical needs, if you are navigating dementia, or if you physically require round the clock professional medical care, then medical facilities and nursing homes are a profound blessing. You must listen to your doctors. Never ever compromise your physical safety or become a danger to yourself out of sheer stubbornness or pride. Accepting necessary medical help when your body truly fails is the ultimate act of taking responsibility for your life. Please, promise me you will not play games with your physical health or avoid seeking professional help when you truly need it. What I am talking about today is for your soul. It is for those of you who are biologically slowing down, who might need a little help carrying the groceries, but who are still capable, still lucid, and still desperately longing to live the rest of your days on your own terms. When that fear of living alone first set in for me, the immediate thought was to turn to family. Society tells us that if you cannot live entirely alone, you should pack up your life and move in with your adult children. But I had watched that exact scenario play out with several of my dearest friends, and I saw the hidden cost. You move into your daughter's guest room, and virtually overnight, The entire dynamic of your existence flips upside down. You go from being the matriarch, the undisputed head of your own household, to being a permanent guest in someone else's domain. You start apologizing for watching your television shows at your normal volume. You feel incredibly guilty for needing a ride to the pharmacy on a Tuesday afternoon. You tiptoe around their arguments, their schedules, their lives. You become a burden, no matter how much they genuinely love you. I decided very quickly that I refused to let my presence become an obligation that slowly drained my children's joy. So, if moving in with family strips you of your authority, the only other option society aggressively pushes on us is the nursing home. But let me tell you about a psychological concept I learned about years ago that changed how I view these institutions forever. It is a phenomenon called learned helplessness. It was extensively documented by psychologists back in the late 1960s and 70s. They discovered that if you take away a person's ability to control their own environment, if you consistently remove their daily choices and challenges, they eventually just give up. Even when an opportunity to take control presents itself later on, they will not take it. Their brain has essentially been rewired to believe they are completely powerless. This is precisely what happens in institutional care, even in the most expensive, luxurious facilities. When you move into one of those places, they take over your existence. They decide that breakfast is served promptly at 7:30 a.m. They decide that dinner is at 5 p.m. They manage your medications, they do your laundry, they clean your room, they arrange your highly structured social calendar. On the surface, it sounds like a luxury, doesn't it? Having every single chore done for you. But it is a silent, creeping killer of the human spirit. When every tiny physical and mental challenge is removed from your daily routine, your brain receives a very clear signal. It says, "My work here is done. I guess I do not need to try anymore." You stop making decisions. You stop problem solving. Your muscles atrophy from lack of use, yes, but your willpower and your cognitive sharpness atrophy much faster. People do not just die of old age in those places. They fade away from a profound, soul crushing lack of purpose. If you look at the blue zones around the world, those specific regions in Japan, Italy, Costa Rica, where people routinely live vibrant, active lives well past 100 years old, do you know what you will not find? You will not find glossy retirement warehouses. In those ancient cultures, older people remain deeply integrated into the daily life and friction of their communities. They still have daily chores. They still have responsibilities to their neighbors. They have a tangible reason to get out of bed, put their feet on the floor, and face the day. They are needed. And I can tell you from 83 years of living, being needed is the greatest, most potent medicine on the face of the earth. So, if moving in with your kids is an emotional trap, and a nursing home is a comfortable velvet cage that slowly erases your autonomy, what do you do when the house simply becomes too much to handle entirely alone? You do not panic. You use the most powerful, valuable asset you currently possess, your home. You do not abandon your castle. You fundamentally redefine how it operates. I did some research, and I discovered a forgotten method, a way of living that people used to do naturally a century ago, before we outsourced aging to corporations. It is called intergenerational home sharing. Instead of liquidating my assets to pay $4,000 or $5,000 a month to sit in a beige room down a sterile hallway, I looked around my house at my empty guest bedrooms. I realized that while I had abundant space, a paid off mortgage, and decades of wisdom, there was a whole younger generation out there struggling deeply with the crushing modern cost of living. There were people who had the physical energy I was losing, but who had no stable place to rest their heads. So I took action. I put out a carefully worded advertisement in local community boards. Let me tell you, I was not looking to hire a caregiver, and I certainly was not looking to adopt a new best friend or a surrogate grandchild. I was looking for a mutually beneficial, highly practical alliance. I eventually found a woman in her late 40s. She was navigating a brutal, financially devastating divorce. She was starting her life over from scratch, and she desperately needed a quiet, affordable place to live while she went back to school. We sat down at my kitchen table, drank a cup of coffee, and we made a deal. I offered her the upstairs bedroom and a private bathroom for a fraction of what rent would cost anywhere else in this entire city. In exchange, the contract was incredibly simple. She would carry the heavy groceries into the house. She would change the light bulbs I could no longer reach without risking a fall. She would shovel the snow off the front walkway in the winter. And most importantly, she would simply be present in the house at night, providing the security of knowing I was not completely alone if an emergency struck. Now, let me be very direct about how to make this work, because this is where many people fail. This arrangement requires strict, stoic boundaries. I did not become her therapist, and she did not become my nurse. We drew up a formal, legally binding written agreement. I insisted on background checks, just as any smart landlord would. We agreed on a strict 1 month trial period to ensure our daily habits did not clash. We established unbending rules about overnight guests, noise levels, and how the kitchen would be shared. I maintained absolute, unquestioned authority over my home. I did not give up my throne. I simply hired an ally to help me defend it. I remained the architect of my own life. The peace of mind was instantaneous. The very first night she slept upstairs, I realized as I lay in bed that I was no longer holding my breath, listening to every creak of the floorboards, terrified of falling alone in the dark. I slept deeply and peacefully for the first time in years. And in return, I provided a safe harbor for a woman who needed it just as much as I did. We saved each other. I kept my total independence. I stayed in the home where I raised my family, where every scratch on the hardwood floor and every mark on the doorframe holds a precious memory. And I did it without draining my life savings, enriching a massive corporation, or ever having to beg my children for help. Society wants to neatly categorize us as we age. They want to put us in designated facilities so they don't have to look at the uncomfortable, messy reality of growing older. They want you to believe that your only options are total independence or total institutionalization. But your home is your sanctuary, and your mind is your greatest tool. Do not let a moment of physical weakness or a temporary season of fear convince you to hand over the keys to your autonomy. Think outside the box that society has built for you. You have over 6, 7, or 8 decades of life experience. Use that brilliant, seasoned mind of yours to solve the problem differently. Protect your peace relentlessly. Guard your personal space. And above all else, never ever surrender your dignity just because it is what people expect you to do. Thank you for sitting with me today, for sharing this time, and for listening to an old woman's perspective on how to fight for your right to live fully. Take care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you.